Okay, so you've been diligently and consistently working on reading comprehension, and you're feeling pretty good about looking for the primary and secondary structures in the passages that are key to acing the questions. But reading comprehension isn't something you're doing just for fun, right? You have to ace the LSAT too. And that means doing 4 passages in 35 minutes, which is pretty quick. Students often like to ponder a bit too long, reviewing the passage and the answer choices for longer than they should. Remember that you shouldn't go back to the passage unless you know where to look to confirm or disconfirm an answer. If you have no idea about where in the passage to look, you're better off skipping that question, moving on, and coming back to it if you have time at the end of the section. You want to avoid that trap of scanning the entire passage to answer questions because you just don't have time to do that. Also, if you've read through the answers twice, gone back to the passage once, and you still can't decide, just confidently make an educated guess and move on, even if you're not 100% sure. All right, so now let's talk about some strategies for working through the passages that you can try to be as quick and as accurate as possible. First, as you may already know, all of the sections on the LSAT tend to get more difficult toward the end of the section. So this means that in order to have time to tackle the more difficult passages in the second half of reading comprehension, you have to do those first easier passages a bit more quickly. A good basic rule of thumb to try to stick to is to spend 15 minutes total on passages 1 and 2, and then use the remaining 20 minutes for passages 3 and 4. So the goal is to do passages 1 and 2 in about 7 or 8 minutes apiece, and that'll leave you 10 minutes for each of the remaining passages. That's the basic strategy. 15 minutes for passages 1 and 2, and 20 minutes for passages 3 and 4. You should try this out on some practice sections and see how it goes. Keep in mind that you still want to be flexible in how you're working through the section. Just because the third and fourth passages tend to be more difficult doesn't mean that they always are. You very well may come across a reading comprehension section where the first or second passage seems really tough, and that's totally fine. In that case, give yourself a couple more minutes for that tough passage. Or if you can't wrap your head around what's going on in the first paragraph, just move on to the next one, which will hopefully be a little easier, and come back to that tough one later. At the very least, the idea is that you'd like to try to do the easier passages in 7 or 8 minutes each, and give yourself around 10 minutes to do the more difficult passages, regardless of where in the section those difficult passages appear.